Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and to our ongoing study in the Gospel of Matthew. We're going to take a look at Matthew 14, 10 through 14. In the commentary, it'll be pages 555 to 561. And we're going to look at a concept for Eucharistic activity. Let's begin with block 3 instead of block 1. Let's take a look at this Greek word that defines the kind of ministry that Christ had. Because the ministry of Christ was one of Eucharistic activity. So block 3, it's Strong's number 2170. It's the Greek Eucharistos, from eu, meaning well, and charizomai, meaning to show favor. Eucharistic activity is the proclaimed gospel message that we are well favored and forgiven, and therefore should mirror this Eucharistic activity in ongoing faith and thankfulness. So keep that in mind. That's your interpretive tool there in block 3. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at the text. Jesus and his meditative retreat, I should say his attempted meditative retreat, that got interrupted after the murder of John the Baptist. And he, Herod Antipas, sent and beheaded John in prison. And his head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. Then John's disciples came, took up the body and buried it, then went out and told Jesus. When Jesus heard of it, he departed by boat to a desert place of privacy. But the people heard of it and followed by feet, going around the shoreline. And when Jesus saw this large crowd following him, he was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. So Jesus is trying to have a personal time of meditating on this loss of John the Baptist, and so he is going to retreat to the east side of Lake Tiberias, and the crowd, which is large now, they go around the shoreline on foot and end up on the east side of Lake Tiberias waiting for him. They get there quickly. And then Christ is, because of their desperation, he's moved with compassion toward them. Now, keep in mind, Eucharistic activity. Let's go look at the commentary in block 2. Jesus inaugurates Eucharistic activity in his ministry. That is true. Eucharistic activity begins with compassion. Jesus had compassion toward the crowd. Later in Matthew 14:19, we find a very specific sequence of verbs being used. He blessed and broke and gave the loaves. This is the same Eucharistic action used at the Last Supper. And catch this, it was also used at the Emmaus meal in Luke 24:30. Remember the two disciples who had a meal with Christ? He took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them. Then he opened their understanding. Underline that, highlight that. Then he opened their understanding so that they could understand the scriptures concerning the Christ who is to suffer and then be raised from the dead. All of the feeding narratives within Matthew serve as evidence of the Eucharistic activity of Christ, okay? And in other words, the feeding of the 5,000, we all know that narrative. We've heard it probably preached numerous times. But we also know that when they returned from that ministry of Christ, everybody that went back to Capernaum, and they asked Jesus for bread. Give us bread from heaven, like Moses. And Jesus had to correct them and say, Moses didn't give the bread from heaven. My Father gave the bread from heaven, and I am the living bread from heaven. And he had to correct their interest, but their interest was physical bread. And we know from this Emmaus narrative that Jesus was teaching while he was healing. Jesus was ministering while he was healing. He always would teach. Whatever he did, teaching would be a part of it. And yet all day, while they're over there on the eastern side of Lake Tiberias, they return from there and they've learned nothing. They've learned nothing concerning the Spirit. Instead, they want more physical blessing. And Christ rebukes them. You didn't listen to anything I said. You didn't listen to what I was teaching. And the desire in any narrative concerning the feedings or a meal like the Emmaus meal, it's always with the intent to open the understanding of those Christ is with. His desire is to open the understanding to a covenant of mercy, a covenant of friendship, a covenant that remembers Hosea 6:6. I prefer mercy over sacrifice. I prefer those who seek knowledge of God over burnt offerings. Jesus used Hosea 6:6 to rebuke the scribes and the Pharisees because he said, you have not studied this prophet Hosea enough. You haven't studied it enough. You haven't internalized Hosea 6:6. You don't comprehend it because it's not in your heart. I can see that. And Christ used Hosea 6:6 as a rebuke against the scribes and the Pharisees that certainly were not religious leaders who did their work based on mercy and compassion. No, it was all ritual, festival calendars, obedience to the temple rules, and it was not a mercy-driven religious leadership. And Christ saw that, and we know that from many instances, not just Matthew, but many instances where Christ rebuked the Sanhedrin over and over and over again. And who were the interpreters of the law? The scribes and the Pharisees. But Christ goes, you're not accurately interpreting the law if you are not applying what the prophets have taught, and you have ignored Hosea 6:6. And I have come to proclaim that type of ministry, and I have come to inaugurate a ministry of Eucharistic activity, an activity that proclaims the gospel message that we are well favored and forgiven. We are charizomai, favored. We are well favored and forgiven by the grace of God through the Messiah, the living Christ. Not by our works, not by our adherence to temple practices, not by our adherence to all the Sabbath rules that were added by the Sanhedrin that were not even a part of the law. But not because of that, no. By the grace of God through the mercy of the living Christ only. Then we hear the gospel as those who are well favored and forgiven. Therefore, we should mirror this Eucharistic activity through ongoing faith and living a life of thankfulness. That's key. I mean, especially us in America here, we have so much compared to other impoverished parts of the world. We have so much to be thankful for. We should live a life of thankfulness day in, day out, praying or meditating 24/7. We never stop meditating on the grace of God through the living Messiah, Christ, and we meditate on the Eucharistic activity. In our church, in the 8 a.m. service, we close the service with the Eucharistic activity of taking the Lord's Supper. Whoever sits around me knows that if you sit near me, we're going to pray a private prayer of blessing over each element of the Eucharist. We say it's just very brief, but we all hold up the bread, and then I pray, not real loud, but I pray out loud where they can hear me, a Eucharistic blessing over the bread as the body of Christ. Then we take it together, and then we take the wine, and again, I pray out loud a very brief Eucharistic blessing over the wine. We take that together, and that's been a tradition every 8 a.m. service, the end of it. Everybody knows if you sit close to Barry, you're going to be praying over the Eucharist elements before you take them. And we do that, and Steve and Lisa are usually right there with me. So today we had Jean, Renee, Steve, Lisa, myself, and we all prayed a prayer of Eucharistic blessing over the elements before we took part in the Eucharistic activity of the Lord's Supper. All right, all of that. Let's go to block 2, note 2, Matthew 26, 29 to 31. And it talks about the Eucharistic activity. But I say unto you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine until the day I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. And then, while at the Mount of Olives, Jesus said, you will be offended, scandalizo, you will stumble at what's going to take place here tonight, because he's going to be betrayed and arrested. These narratives all anticipate the promise of the coming messianic banquet. And that was first prophesied in Isaiah 25, 6 through 9. And since Matthew is the gospel from the Jewish perspective, I've added it in here. Let's just take a look at it. Isaiah 25, 6 through 9. And in this mountain the Lord shall make a feast unto all people. He will destroy the veil over all nations, and he will swallow up death in victory. This is the victory of the coming return of Christ and the Messianic feast. It was prophesied by Isaiah 25, 6 through 9. Put a big circle around that, highlight that. That's the Old Testament reference for this lesson. And now to close out, we're going to go back to 3. We're going to take a look at the Greek concept again, now that you've had a chance to take a look at the offerings from RT France. The Greek concept for Eucharistic activity is Strong's number 2170. Now, for those of you that don't know, Strong's is like a go-to concordance for New Testament Greek. one of the first books, it might have been the first one of the first books I ever bought from my theology library. I mean, I was like a 1-year-old Christian, maybe not even 1 year old. I went down and I bought a Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. It's huge. It is huge. I've still got it in here in the library, but I loved it because I hadn't even taken any Greek at Dallas Baptist yet. I hadn't even gone to Dallas Baptist at that time. I was brand new. I was going to the Trinity Baptist Church in River Oaks at the time because my girlfriend went there, and I went there with her, and met John Hatch, the pastor, tremendous pastor. I love that church, and I enjoyed ministering there. Eventually, I was even put on the church staff in a minor role, but I was on the church staff. And while I was at that church as a young Christian, I wrote a commentary on James. I wrote a commentary on Philippians. I wrote a commentary on Colossians. I wrote 3 commentaries just because I was so excited about this new discovery, this new faith that I knew nothing about. But in order to do that, one of the first books I ever bought was Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. And so whenever I give you a Strong's number, it's from this very extensive concordance on New Testament Greek. And in this case, Eucharistos is Strong's number 2170. It's from the prefix EU, meaning well, and the primary word charizomai, to show favor. In other words, Eucharistic activity is the proclaimed gospel message that we are well favored and forgiven, and you can add to that through Christ, and therefore we should mirror this Eucharistic activity in ongoing faith and ongoing thankfulness. And we could add to that an ongoing remembrance in the Eucharist activity in the church. Every 8 a.m. service concludes with the sacrament of the Eucharist. Every 8 a.m. service concludes with that sacrament, a sacrament of remembrance. We're very blessed here to have a great lesson on the ministry of Christ as a ministry of Eucharistic activity. That wraps up 14:10 through 14. And where do we go? 14:22 to 31 next time. 14:22 to 31 next time. Thank you, my dear friends. Thank you so much.